Good evening. Welcome to the June 1st edition of the Downers Grove Village Council meeting. We want to welcome our guests this evening. We do, however, want to continue to be mindful of total person limits and IDPH guidance. So for the time being, we continue to expect that masks will be worn in council chambers. If you're in attendance this evening, please do continue to wear your mask and watch your distance. As always, we'll begin with the Pledge of Allegiance. I pledge allegiance
to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all.
Rosa, would you please call the roll?
Mayor Barnett.
Here.
Commissioner Jose.
Here.
Commissioner Wallace. Commissioner Sadowski-Fugit. Here. Commissioner Culvaney.
Here.
Commissioner Gilmartin.
Here.
Commissioner Glover.
Here. Thank you. The first item on tonight's agenda is public comments. This is a portion of the meeting where we are taking public comment on items not on tonight's agenda. So if you're here for a subject that's not on the agenda tonight, please take a moment, come on down to the podium, tell us your name and what's on your mind.
Mask for talking?
Sure.
Hi, my name is Bob Taft. I live at 2707 63rd Street, Downers Grove. I'm the owner of Q Pub and Grill in the Meadowbrook Shopping Center over at 63rd and Belmont. And I just wanted to talk real briefly about the board taking up the vote on allowing video gaming. I do have currently 3 other locations in Illinois. Every town does allow video gaming at them, which is Lamont, Aurora, and Darien, so all surrounding communities. What video gaming really does for the business is allows us to obviously improve our infrastructure of the business, make repairs, pay our staff a little more, and be truthfully more competitive with pricing, especially everyone's seen the rise in food costs recently and energy costs and everything. You know, it's something for us that's very tough to pass on to the consumer. So when you have something that does generate extra revenue with very little expense on our end, it makes us much easier to be competitive. It's really hard in Downers Grove to compete with like Woodridge, for example, which is a block away from me. And there's locations there that can keep their burger prices lower, keep their drink prices lower because they are making the extra revenue from gaming. They don't have to necessarily pass on the increase in the food cost. The other thing I think that people need to look at is, if you have a group, it just happened to me about 2 weeks ago where we were going out with 4 couples and 2 of the people wanted to play video gaming. So we ended up going to a town that allowed it, went out to eat there instead of to a different town because just 2 of the people wanted to throw 20 bucks into a slot machine. So I think that you end up losing that revenue. You also lose then filling up in gas perhaps in that town or perhaps buying groceries in that town. So there's a lot of ancillary things that you can be missing out on other than just the gaming revenue. And I know one of the comments that I've heard different people make is that it can ruin the atmosphere of a location. Well, that's something that's up to the proprietor. Obviously not every location in Downers Grove may get it and may not be conducive to their business. But for businesses that are it is conducive to, I don't see why it's an issue to allow something like that. And I'd like to at least get a vote on it. I think it would be very helpful for a lot of the businesses. Some would not get it. Understand that it's not mandatory. I mean, if you guys were to allow it to happen, it's not like every business that has a liquor license has to have it. So it's something that's up to the actual business owner. And I just think that it's something that really should consider, especially what our types of businesses have been through in the last couple of years. If you don't have a carry-out, last year and a half, I should say, if you don't have a carry-out type business structured, it's been a really tough year and a half, and this would really help. I've been in Downers Grove since 1998. It was actually my earliest business, and the numbers I'm doing, last year was the worst year I've had since probably 98 or 99, and then right now we're just starting to get recovered. So something like this would definitely help, and at least level the playing field with the towns that surround me that all allow it.
Okay, thank you.
All right, thank you.
Please come on down.
How you doing? My apologies, I haven't got here sooner. Kind of like Bob, I own a business in Downers Grove called Downers Sand Club. We're an indoor volleyball sports bar. We've been there since 2014, the longest tenant in that complex since the original North Beach was back there in the 1990s. Having gaming allowed in the town, as Bob mentioned, would definitely allow us to compete with other businesses, other towns, but also obviously it's going to bring in a lot of tax revenue. You know, my biggest thing is ever since the food and beverage tax got instituted, you know, that kind of hurt things. And having this this gaming revenue, you know, maybe something either, you know, that gets relooked at, or instead of having a separate food and beverage tax, you guys combine that and just raise the Downers tax. You know, having a larger tax overall is going to have all businesses contribute to the tax instead of just restaurants and bars, which are suffering greatly because of COVID. You know, as Bob mentioned, you know, last year was probably one of the worst years. We were on a record pace before COVID hit, and to offer more things for customers to come in, we want that. You know, with my business being all near the hotels, I mean, that would be a great attractor to bring customers by. You know, in my particular case, I've had such a staffing issue, we haven't really been open to the general public because I'm so limited in what I can do. And since it's just me for the most part, and it's hard to do 10 jobs at once, which most owners are, you know, having to do more and more now. And we'd like to stay in business, and, you know, we understand that this town is a little different than others, and this is something that may not be the majority that you guys may love, but, you know, ultimately when it comes down to the bottom line, when you look at dollars and cents, this is something that's going to help Downers Grove. You know, the state obviously hasn't helped, and that's the reason why the food and beverage tax came aboard. But adding the gaming here is just going to make things so much easier in so many ways, not only for you as a town, but for businesses like mine and Bob's and others that are out there. So I really strongly, you know, recommend that you guys do vote for this. You know, as Bob mentioned, I mean, there's not a lot of businesses that either are going to want it or they have the option to at least have it. So why not do that? That's only going to help Downers succeed and get better, because then maybe there'll be more people going to downtown Downers, you know, where you have a lot of restaurants and bars there that may want to add this, and it may be conducive for their business and would attract people to make that a more fun atmosphere. So, thank you.
Thank you. Anyone else? Subjects not on tonight's agenda. Okay, move on. Item 4, we have a proclamation this evening. Proclamations in Downers Grove are a mayoral prerogative and have been used to highlight, celebrate, or emphasize the importance of individuals, organizations, and causes over the years. One of the first I authored as mayor was on civil rights, because I believe the most fundamental job of government is to support and defend our basic rights. No person should face discrimination, violence, hostility, or hate in speech or in action, and any such treatment deserves condemnation and rebuke wherever and whenever it occurs. Discrimination of any kind reveals a fundamental disregard for others, which endangers the most basic principles of our society. All Americans should take on the duty to advocate for laws and policies that will protect everyone's individual rights, equality, and work, and they should work for a world where people can enjoy their rights fully. Until all are treated fairly and equally by all, then our work is not done. Our obligation to this nation, to our Creator, and to each other is not fulfilled. This obligation is one that falls to us not only as a government or a community, but as individuals. If you think equal rights aren't about you, or aren't of your concern, or aren't something you can affect, you're failing your community. Every day, in every interaction, we have choices to make, and it is incumbent on all of us to make the right choice to treat others the way we would be treated. Too often we treat others in ways that belie what it means to be an American, and doing so we betray the values that define us as a nation. Indeed, it is true, injustice anywhere is a threat to justice everywhere. Let us take every opportunity to turn back discrimination and prejudice everywhere it exists, and to stand together to advance the principles upon which our nation was founded. The self-evident truth that all men are created equal, endowed by their Creator with certain unalienable rights, is not just a statement, it's a directive. And so, whereas members of the LGBTQ+ community have faced discrimination and mistreatment that no one should ever face, and whereas the Village of Downers Grove supports the rights of every individual to experience equality of treatment and freedom from discrimination, and whereas discrimination based on history, gender, age, disability, race, religion, sexuality, or socioeconomic status is antithetical to the values of our nation, our state, and our village. And whereas the Village of Downers Grove believes in fairness and equality and values our diverse population of both residents and businesses, recognizing that such diversity is one of this community's greatest strengths. And whereas we recognize that in order to build upon this diversity and maximize the potential for benefit to our community, it is essential that equality of opportunity and the absence of discrimination be at the core of all village policies, procedures, and efforts. And whereas, as long as the promise of equality for all remains unfulfilled, all Americans are negatively affected. And whereas the intrinsic dignity of each person must always be respected in the world, in action, and in law. Now therefore, I, Robert T. Barnett, Mayor of Downers Grove, proclaim June 2021 as Pride Month in the Village of Downers Grove. And I call upon all businesses and residents of Downers Grove to work together to promote equal rights for all, regardless of sexual orientation or gender identity, and to encourage residents to reflect on the notion that America's diversity is its greatest strength, and to urge all residents and businesses to respect and honor our diverse community and celebrate and build a culture of inclusiveness and belonging for all. Dated this first day of June 2021, Downers Grove, Illinois. We have a few members of DGEQ here that we're going to hand this off to, and we appreciate their work here in town. Okay, item 5 on our agenda tonight are minutes of previous council meetings. Is there a motion concerning previous minutes?
Mayor, I move that the council adopt the May 18th, 2021 minutes as presented.
Second.
Any comments, council? All those in favor say aye.
Aye.
Opposed? That carries. Item 6, our consent agenda. Is there a motion concerning tonight's consent agenda?
Mayor, I move that the council adopt the consent agenda as presented.
Second.
Any questions or comments? All those in favor say aye.
Aye.
Opposed? 2 is unanimous. Item 7 on our agenda is our active agenda. We do not have an active agenda tonight. This is the portion of the meeting where we would take formal action of some type. So we will move on to item 8, which is our first reading. This is the portion of the meeting where we either begin or continue to discuss items that we expect to take future action on. And with that, I'll hand it over to Manager Fieldman.
Thank you, Mayor Barnett. There are 4 items on tonight's first reading agenda, really 3 discussion topics. The first 2 items concern the property at 2205 Butterfield Road. Here to present background information on this petition is our Community Development Director, Stan Popovich.
Thank you, Manager Fieldman. Good evening, Mayor and council members. As Manager Fieldman noted, the first 2 items are a text amendment and special use regarding drive-through medical use for 2205 Butterfield Road. The first is a zoning text amendment for the ORM zoning district. Currently, the only drive-through uses in the ORM zoning district are drive-through banks. So that is a limitation to accommodate office and research and development manufacturing uses in the zoning district. And then the drive-through banks is a similar providing professional service to those businesses in that area. And so that's the limitation on that. The proposal would allow a drive-through medical facility as a special use in the ORM zoning district. Again, medical facilities are similar to some of the uses that we see up in that zoning district, and also provide a professional service as banks do in that zoning district. In this map, you can see the ORM zone properties are in purple. They're principally around the Butterfield and Lacey Road intersection, Oak Grove Commons, Industrial Park on the north side of town, Opus Place, Warrenville Road, and then a smatter throughout the Ellsworth Business Park. The proposal specifically regards 2205 Butterfield Road, which is in the northwest corner of the village. We see it here on the map in the Wood Creek Business Park next to the Esplanade planned unit development. The building right here is at the corner of combination quarters of Wood Creek, Lacey, and Butterfield Road. There's an existing bank facility, vacant bank facility that is currently Edward Elmhurst Health. That was a former bank there that had a drive-through lanes on the west side of the property. There are no proposed changes to the access points or any exterior changes to the building with regard to circulation or parking in that area. The drive-through pattern would continue along counterclockwise around the building. Currently, there are 4 drive-through lanes. The petitioner would be using 3 of the lanes shown here. The 4th lane closest to the building would be modified to include a ramp and some steps for medical personnel to come in and out of the building. So the only changes would be from the 4 lanes to the 3 lanes. The petitioner is proposing here, you can see in the picture on the left-hand side, a movable storefront system that will be allowed in colder months to close up so that they can have outdoor services, drive-up services for medical issues or medical items there and be protected from the elements in the colder months. The comprehensive plan notes that the site is an office corporate campus. We're looking for high-quality developments that attract new commercial developments and uses that way in that area. They should be focusing on attracting regional customer base, which a medical facility can provide as well. At their May 3rd Plan Commission meeting, the Commission found that the criteria for the text amendment was met, and also the criteria for the special use was also met as well. If there's any questions at this time, Mayor, I can answer those for you. We also have the petitioner here with us tonight as well.
Great, thank you, Stan.
You're welcome.
Drive-through medical. Raise your hand if you had drive-through medical in the last year. It's a different world. This is an example, folks, of how ordinances are made and then often adjusted over time. Things change, businesses change, business models change, demands and needs change, so we try and adjust ourselves as well. Anybody have any comments from the council or questions? Greg?
Thank you, Mayor. I'd just like to thank Edward Elmhurst for bringing this forward and really grabbing hold of this new, innovative way to provide medical care. I think it's only right that the village and its ordinances would be flexible along with that. I think the text amendment makes perfect sense, and having the control of a special use on it, just in case there's something that we didn't quite foresee in the future that comes down the pipe, is a good thing to have. So I'm in full support of this, and I look forward to voting for it. Thank you, Mayor.
Thank you, Greg. Rich?
Yeah, I agree with Commissioner Jose's comments, and furthermore, I think this will blend right into that particular intersection. I've passed that intersection, I don't know how many dozens of times, and I never noticed that bank there until today, because usually I was going to the DoubleTree or to some other place within that office park, and so I think it will continue to be utilized. Plenty of room for traffic, it's a busy street, and there's plenty of lanes there, so I think be a fine addition. Also, thank you for your investment in Downers Grove.
Stan, the only question I had, and it doesn't need to be answered this evening, but were there any sort of additional or new FD-related review questions or comments with the closed doors situation? That strikes me as a little different.
So we'll have to go through the building permit process. We'll have to check to see if there's a sprinkler requirement on that. There might be. I'd have to check with the fire department, and we can bring that answer back for you next week.
Thank you. Anyone from the audience have a question or a comment on this item? Okay, we'll move on. Thank you.
Thank you, Mayor. The next item is consideration of an ordinance amending the Village of Downers Grove Liquor Code and Regulations. And here to present background information on this item is our village attorney, Enza Petrarca.
Thank you, Dave. Keeping in line with the world post-COVID, this ordinance also is related to post-COVID regulations. As you may recall, last year, in an effort to address some of the COVID relief efforts, the state passed a law allowing cocktails to go, which allowed all liquor license establishments to offer for sale cocktails to go on a pickup basis and a delivery basis. That law is set to expire tomorrow. However, it's been extended through January of 2024. So that would allow these establishments, all liquor establishments, to continue those sales through January of 2024. The law also allows municipalities to place stricter regulations upon these sales, which is what this proposed ordinance actually is trying to do. The differences between the state law and the proposed municipal ordinance that's before you tonight are several things. One is only the sales of pick-up sales is allowed as opposed to delivery of cocktails to go. It's limited to only certain license classifications, mainly restaurant license classifications, and it requires, in conjunction with the cocktail sale, a food order. So those are the differences between the state regulation, that's the new law, and the proposed ordinance before you tonight. It also prohibits cocktails from being delivered in Downers Grove from licensees, and further clarifies which license classifications are allowed to deliver beer, wine, and alcoholic liquor in Downers Grove. Happy to answer any questions, Mayor.
Thank you, Enza. Let me just add that from my perspective, Enza and I have talked about this a little bit leading up to tonight as liquor commissioner. And I'm going to add just a little more context from the non-legal aspect. When, as was mentioned earlier, the law was changed largely in reaction to COVID, and we in Downers Grove tried to make similar opportunities available to our restaurateurs. It's really focused on trying to find a way to help restaurateurs in a situation where they could not bring people in, and even when they were serving outside, they were relatively limited, as well as encouraging the idea of to-go sales. So fast forward now, and one of the thoughts that is in my mind, and I think was behind some of these additional restrictions compared to the state law, is that remains sort of our goal, or at least mine, to try and find ways to allow our restaurateurs the ability to expand the appeal of their restaurant business, not to turn everyone with a liquor license into a liquor store. And so that's kind of the crux of it. Enzo's gone through, and the details are all in there, which license classifications and what activities and not activities, but that's sort of the core of the issue. So with that, any questions or comments from the council?
Yeah.
Leslie.
I have a couple questions. So I am a little bit curious just as to why delivery of beer and wine would be allowed and not cocktails, because for me it feels a little bit more like, in terms of like the integrity of not turning them into a liquor store, it feels like their specialty cocktails might be less like a beer or liquor, like a liquor store, than a bottle of wine or beer. So I'm just curious about the kind of the rationale of why we went there. I'm definitely in agreement, with the restrictions on the licenses. I agree. I'm in agreement with the conjunction with the food purchase, because again, they are restaurants first, and so it's meant to be a complete meal. But that was just my only question. The other one is, in terms of cocktails, so could they theoretically sell a mixer and a sealed smaller bottle of liquor if it's sealed and not pre-mixed?
So,
and would that be?
In terms of the delivery or the sale? Or
Delivery.
So for delivery, it's really limited to the license classifications that sell off-premise alcohol. Think Binny's, Prestige, the stores that sell. So they are certainly allowed to sell alcohol, bottles of alcoholic liquor, if their license allows them to do it. They can't, what they're restricted from selling is a mixed drink, already pre-mixed.
Okay.
But anything they sell in their store already, prepackaged off premise, they can sell. So it has to be sealed and prepackaged in order for delivery. What we're trying to prohibit is somebody at an establishment mixing a drink and then putting it in a container, sealing it, and delivering it to somebody. But anything that's prepackaged is allowed to be delivered, so long as their license classification provides for that.
And then what were the specific concerns with, something that would be pre-mixed and sealed being delivered?
Well, these license classifications do not sell those.
Got it.
So they don't sell anything on premises. So they're not the type of establishment that you can go to and have a drink on premise. They're only off-premise sales. So that's why the license classifications that are allowed to deliver do not have that ability in their store.
actually.
So like Benny's doesn't
can't
sell.
mix, right, yeah,
not-
yeah,
So
right. They don't sell mixed
that's why
drinks.
it's limited to that.
But out of, like, why did we choose to limit it?
I
Because
think
that
it's
was a stricter regulation, right? That was one of the areas where we went strict.
for the cocktails to go, because
Yeah.
for the cocktails to go,
Yeah.
they can there are no delivery for the cocktails to go. We've restricted it to delivery and pick up only. So certainly you can go to the establishment and pick up a mixed drink,
Sure.
but we've restricted all delivery for those types of sales. And that was just out of concern for checking the IDs and checking all that with that. So we restricted that all only to pick up sales.
Okay.
It's very dependent upon classification. And so one of the really critical parts to what Enzo was saying was that the activities today,
Yeah.
some of those are not, some license holders are not eligible for those activities today anyway.
Right.
And so not expanding those is part of what's embedded in here. The R-class licenses and, I should have a list in front of me,
Yeah, they're over here.
BR and WBs, those were the ones where we wanted to allow for that to go sales. The places like a Benny's, for instance,
Right.
those aren't those folks anyway.
Right, yeah.
Shouldn't pick on Benny's, liquor store. Did that help?
A little.
Okay.
Come a little bit.
So I just want to make sure I'm clear, because I got a little lost in that. The ordinance is saying basically the drink can be mixed and then picked up.
Yes.
But in the case of like a kit, where someone would have like a sealed bottle from a restaurant, an old-fashioned kit from Foxtail, I'll just use that as an example, where it's a sealed bottle with some ingredients and a package would not be available for pickup because it wasn't mixed. Is that the key differentiator?
For pickup, they can pick
Yeah.
up whether it's sealed or mixed.
Okay.
For delivery.
It's the delivery
Got it.
of the other
Okay.
classifications that cannot deliver a mixed drink. But for pickup, they can pick up whether it's mixed or whether
Got
it's
it.
sealed.
Part of that is the idea of the carting process. Right?
Yep.
That we're feeling more confident in the restaurateurs and their staff that's on hand processing that
Right.
as opposed
Yeah.
to
Yeah.
some random delivery.
Because they're trained, yeah.
Right. Other questions, Rich?
Well, it just seems like a reasonable compromise. I know one of the reasons we backed that last year is the restaurants were complaining that their tickets were down because they didn't have people dining in and adding a bottle of wine or mixed drinks with dinner and lingering and all that. So I think it would solve that problem. But, you know, like a lot of things in government, it's a compromise that helps prevent creating another issue. And then you don't have to worry, well, how much food are we delivering versus how much alcohol are we delivering?
Anyone else in the council? Any audience questions or comments on this item? Come on down to the podium, please.
Hey, John Avery, I'm actually here for a different issue, but you guys need to turn up the volume a little bit. We're having trouble hearing you.
Okay.
Did I understand you correctly that it's okay, according to the proposed ordinance or whatever the wording it should be used here, for people who want to come and pick up a meal and drinks from a restaurant and take it home themselves, that it's okay for them to pick up a drink that's already been mixed?
That is correct, under state law currently.
And why the heck is that allowed, given that it's illegal to carry an open bottle of wine or an open bottle or can of beer in the car? What?
There are certain restrictions in that it has to be in a sealed container, it has to be put in the trunk of the car, it has to be labeled properly, it has to be sealed.
Okay, all right. That answers my question. It would help the volume.
Okay.
Answer that question.
It's good to get clarification. These are workshop sessions. This is the point, is to try and get as many people as clear as possible and as much input as possible. Anything else on this subject? Okay, we'll talk more about it in the future. Moving on.
Thank you, Mayor. The last item on tonight's first reading agenda, we are looking for Village Council policy direction on the design and construction of a proposed sidewalk on Norfolk from Maine to Saratoga. And keeping with our tradition, Andy Sikich from our Public Works Department is here to tell us the background on this item. Andy.
Thanks, Dave. Good evening, Mayor and Council. As Dave said, tonight I'll be presenting the proposed sidewalk in the Kingsley School neighborhood along Norfolk Street as presented earlier in the year as part of the District 58 sidewalk plan. Last year, several residents petitioned the village for a sidewalk on the south side of Norfolk from Saratoga to Carpenter. Village Council considered the request on September 15th and directed staff to prepare a plan for the construction of sidewalks near District 58 schools. Staff evaluated many potential sidewalk segments and developed a proposed 4-year plan which included 5 sidewalk segments at 4 schools. These should be considered as standalone projects and should be further evaluated for specific neighborhood trade-offs. Staff is proposing the construction of these sidewalks over the next 4 years, and District 58 staff support this plan. The first segment to be considered as part of the plan is the Kingsley School neighborhood. The proposal is to construct a sidewalk on the south side of Norfolk from Saratoga to Main Street in 2021. On this slide here, if you can see it, you can see a map of the general project location. You notice Norfolk is along the north side of Kingsley Elementary School. Just wanted to point out 1 block south of Norfolk is Oxford, and the location of Oxford and Main Street was actually, it's the location of the proposed traffic signal under the District 99 pedestrian safety study. So that's 1 block south of here is where that traffic signal is proposed to be located, which would then relocate the crosswalk from Norfolk across Main to Oxford, which is 1 block south. As with all sidewalk projects, there will be neighborhood trade-offs required for this project. And this evening, I'll be presenting several alternatives and discussing various trade-offs associated with each of them. Then, based on the Council's preferred alternative, staff will proceed with final design and bidding, and we will bring a construction contract back to Council for final consideration. This slide here, we use this slide in all of our sidewalk presentations. It's a slide that depicts a graphic representation of the typical public right-of-way. It's generally, as is the case here, rights-of-way are about 66 feet across, which is roughly 33 feet from the center of the road. And that leaves about 21 feet from the edge of the pavement to the right-of-way line. So that's the area that you'll commonly hear us refer to as the parkway, and that's public property. So that's the area that typically we're looking at when we're looking at building sidewalks and other things in the public right-of-way. When we design sidewalks, there's a lot of factors that need to be considered, and they all work to shape where the sidewalk is placed, and they can often limit some of our options. I'm not going to read through all 8 of these bullet points here, but you can see that these are all the factors that we go through when we design a sidewalk that often will determine where it needs to be located and how it needs to be built. So some of the specific neighborhood trade-offs that you're going to see in the alternatives that I'm going to present tonight are whether the sidewalk is placed within the right-of-way or perhaps on private property within easements, tree preservation, and modifications to the existing drainage system. So the first option is what we would kind of call the standard location for a sidewalk. It's generally 1 foot off the property line inside the right-of-way, approximately 15 feet or so from the road edge. And in this case, for both proposed blocks of the sidewalk, staff is estimating that the option would require the removal of about 16 total trees, including all 7 of the healthy mature trees that are on these 2 blocks. This would require minimal modifications to the existing drainage system, however, and it would not require any easements from private property owners. We estimate that the total cost for both blocks would be around $170,000. So here you can see kind of a graphic depiction of what that would look like. Sidewalk in the typical location, and there's some of those mature trees I talked about needing to be removed for this location. Here's a photo in the same neighborhood, I believe, of a sidewalk generally in what we would think of as that standard location. So alternative 2 is what would be called a carriage walk, which is where the sidewalk is built right along the road's edge. In this alternative, staff is estimating that 7 trees would need to be removed, and none of the healthy, mature trees out there would need to be removed with this option. The drainage impacts, though, would be significant, and it would include the requirement for the addition of a concrete gutter all along the road's edge, but easements would not be required again with this alternative. We estimate that the total cost for both blocks would be around $290,000 for this option. And here again is a depiction of what that might look like. The ditches that you see in this photo would likely need to be filled in and replaced with some sort of storm sewer system that would take care of the drainage because the ditches could no longer be there with the sidewalk in the way. Here's a photo of a typical carriage walk in another location in town. And there's another one. So that's what they typically look like when they're right along the road edge. Alternative 3 would be a sidewalk in the standard location, but that would meander onto private property to avoid those 7 healthy, mature trees. And staff is estimating that this option would require the removal of about 9 trees. Again, none of those healthy, mature trees would be removed with this option. Drainage impacts would be minimal, although several consecutive easements from private property owners would be required on both blocks to make this a feasible alternative. And we estimate that the total cost for both blocks would be around $160,000 for this option. In these next few slides here, you can see a graphic representation of where that sidewalk would end up when it meanders out of the right-of-way and onto private property. So you can see what that would look like. Alternative 4, which I promise is the final alternative, would be a sidewalk again in the standard location, but this time instead of meandering onto private property to avoid the big trees, it would swing towards the road as a carriage walk in those locations. Staff estimates that this option would require removal of about 9 trees, and again, all of those healthy, mature trees would remain. It would have moderate impacts to the existing drainage system, primarily in the area where we needed to put in the carriage walks, and easements would not be required. We are estimating that the total cost for both blocks of this option would be around $190,000. Again, there's that graphic representation of what it would look like when it meanders towards the street as a carriage walk. And finally, on this slide, it's kind of a summary again of all the alternatives. The standard alternative, or alternative 1, the carriage walk alternative, number 2, the standard / meandering onto private property alternative is number 3, and alternative 4 is the standard / carriage walk alternative. So I've kind of summarized the alternatives here and the trade-offs that are required. I'll run through these real quick. So the standard location would require a removal of around 16 trees, including all of the mature trees, but it has one of the lowest anticipated costs and does not require any easements. Alternative 2 is the most expensive and is estimated to cost around $290,000, which is $90,000 over the budget of $200,000 for both blocks. But staff anticipates the least amount of tree removal with this option, and it does not require any easements. Alternative 3 preserves all healthy mature trees, has the lowest anticipated cost, but would require several consecutive easements on both blocks. And alternative 4 has a slightly higher cost than the lowest options, but is still under budget, does not require any easements, and would preserve the 7 healthy mature trees. So it's kind of a short summary of all the trade-offs. On May 13th, staff held a neighborhood meeting with residents from both blocks. Both during and after the neighborhood meeting, we were in contact with just over half the residents total on these 2 blocks. In general, the preferred alternative among the residents who live between Saratoga and Carpenter is to preserve the mature trees through the use of a carriage walk, with 3 households preferring alternative 4 and 2 households preferring alternative 2, and I believe 1 household preferred no sidewalk. 3 of the 7 residents on the block between Carpenter and Main also attended this meeting, and none of them were in favor of a sidewalk regardless of the placement. None of the residents in contact with staff thus far have indicated that they would provide an easement on their private property. So this schedule is basically the same schedule that you saw earlier in the year. We are on the highlighted step there, which is Village Council's consideration of the options and direction to staff to perform final design and bidding. Once given direction as to the preferred alternative, staff will work with our consultant to perform final design. We will obtain bids, and then we anticipate we will be bringing the low bidder, the contract, to council in August for consideration, with construction to follow in September or October of this year. And with that, I would open it up to any questions.
Thanks, Andy. Any council comments or questions? Start the conversation. Greg?
Thank you, Mayor. Thank you, Andy, and to all the staff for the presentation. And I'm glad that the neighborhood meeting went well and we got some good feedback. For my part, I have no interest in a carriage walk. I think if you're going to have a sidewalk that's going to have snow plowed up onto it between 3 and 5 months a year, give or take, it's really not providing the safe walking space that you want for the children that are intended to use it on their way to and from school. So in my mind, 2 and 4 are out right away. Alternative 3, if there's no real interest in easements, then I think that one's out right away as well. So I think that leaves number 1. I'd rather not cut down 16 trees. So what I'd like to see us do is, we've got to take out trees, but let's plant one to one tree ratio. If we can transplant some of them, great. Otherwise, let's plant new trees in roughly the spots that are nearby where the old ones were, and let's try to keep the growth, so to speak.
Could we put you on the spot to talk about both blocks or one block?
Sure. I want the sidewalk. How's that?
Message received. Thank you.
All right.
Thanks for that, Dave. It's an important point, guys, that we give some direction tonight so staff can know what wheels to keep turning. Anyone else? Chris?
Sure. Yeah, just to echo Commissioner Jose's thoughts as well. I think the idea of a carriage is not something that I would be interested in. It does appear alternative 1 seems like the most viable option. No one likes to see those trees go down, and so assuming there is a place to plant 1 to 1, I would support that. Both blocks, Dave.
A question before.
Yeah, please.
So out of curiosity, if the concern is snow, in some of those other areas where we do have the carriage sidewalks, do you have any idea of the impact that it has?
Oh, I think it varies.
walkability?
I will point out that carriage walks are generally wider than a
Yeah.
standard sidewalk because
Sure.
of that.
Okay.
They're generally 6 feet or 7 feet wide. In this case, it'd probably be 6 to save on space. But they are 6 feet because you figure you're going to have a couple feet of a snow windrow.
Okay.
And you want to have at least 48 inches for the sidewalk.
Okay,
So, but we do have them all over. I think it varies depending on, the level of maintenance
right, of
that's
course.
provided.
I mean, yeah,
so.
everything does, yeah.
Yeah, just to be more clear and build on that answer, in Downers Grove, the village does not provide the service to clear the snow, so we depend on our residents to clear the snow on the public walk near them. And so one of the reasons it varies is just whether those folks adjacent to the sidewalk are home and able to do it. The carriage walks, of course, will end up with the snow windrow piled on or near them, making it more difficult to remove snow, especially in heavy events.
And typically about how many of those heavy events do we get a year? Do we have any idea?
4 inches or more,
Yeah.
usually 1 or 2, right?
Yeah, at least. Yeah, this February, I think we had 42 of them back to back. We have a handful of those 4+ inch events on
Okay.
an average year.
So not most of the winter. I mean, given that, I would prefer 4. Knowing that we do typically only have a couple of those really big events and that it is typically a little bit wider, I would prefer to preserve the healthy, mature trees if we can. I think 2 is a definite no-go. That is just, the cost does not, to me, the benefit does not outweigh the cost. 3 is a definite no-go because nobody is interested in putting an easement. And when you look at some of these photos, it really does dig into some folks' yard pretty significantly. So that's a big ask for a homeowner, and especially future homeowners. So my preference would be 4. so, for both.
My turn?
Have at it.
Okay, I don't like the carriage walks, and frankly, even a small amount of snow can carry a hazard. All it has to do is get slick. Think at the end of your driveway, you've just finished snow plowing or shoveling, and then the snowplow comes, and you have to do it all over again, and sometimes you can't because you have to work. But even more so, if you look at what sidewalks are used for, it's kids walking to school, it's kids learning to ride their bikes and then riding their bikes, and for those of you who are to learn to ride a bike on a sidewalk, you know, you sort of ended up in the parkway. Well, in this case, you're ending up in the street if, you know, they make the mistake of being a kid and losing control. Or kids can goof around a little bit too much and just a little horseplay, pushing, shoving, they end up in the street. That's also a street that connects directly to the high school, and not every high school student is responsible and will drive too fast down Norfolk, and I know that's an issue. I'm not a fan at all of losing so many mature trees, because it looks to me like some of those trees were there for 50 years, which means the sticks that we put in their place will take 50 years. And I don't know, I'd almost like to go back to the well and ask the residents if they would reconsider their position. We can't force this on them, but we're not asking them to turn over property to us, we're asking for an easement. That property would still show up as part of their lot dimensions, and I think it would be a much safer environment for the kids. I mean, it's too bad it has to be so close to the houses, but if you get too close to a mature tree and you cut the roots, then that tree will die, and then as it does, it changes the whole nature of that neighborhood. And I ran on the whole idea of finding creative ways of keeping the grove in Downers Grove, so I'm sure there are people that voted for me because of that, so I'm not embarrassed to stand up to that issue and ask the residents if they would reconsider this in a thoughtful way.
One block or two?
Well, I'm saying number 3.
On both blocks.
Pardon me?
I'm sorry, I didn't say that.
Oh, yeah, I'm sorry, on blocks. Yeah, mostly I want to avoid a patchwork quilt kind of situation where we don't have to come back later, but I'm intrigued by if the county has made the decision on exactly where that crosswalk could be, because it could have a real impact. And you have to understand, kids, they'll take the shortest path, and there's a big difference if we're asking children to cross on the south side of Norfolk and where they end up versus the south side of Oxford. If that is lined up on the south side of Oxford, it lines up with the sidewalk on that street. Then they go over 1 block to get to Saratoga, or excuse me, to Carpenter, and then they would either continue going on Oxford and cutting through the El Sierra playing fields, or they would cut over a block to get on the sidewalk that hopefully will make on the south side of Norfolk. So, and if we do it on, if we do that crosswalk on the south side of Oxford, it would go on a slight angle, but it would line up with an existing sidewalk, and we wouldn't be dumping kids off. And we don't know how many kids. It's kind of that whole idea that we're not going to know until we build it. But if we use some common sense, understand how kids, particularly how high school kids think, they're not going to backtrack too far, but they would walk on an angle. I'm sure they want to prefer to hit the light and make that have the power of stopping traffic and crossing safety, as opposed to what they have to do now is a game of Frogger, because that's a pretty fast street at that point. So that was kind of a long question. Do we know where the county wants to put that crosswalk, and do we have input into that?
To answer your first part of your question, we do not know where it will end up. We do have input. It'll ultimately be the county's say, but we do not know yet where that will be.
Okay. Anyone else got any thoughts? Danny?
Yeah.
Sure.
So I definitely support doing it on both streets. Initially, I was for alternative 4, and I could live with the trade-off of saving the trees for a little bit of snow removal. You know, I have a business on Ogden, I have property on Fairview. I have to remove all that snow all the time, so I know what a hindrance that could be. But I could live with that trade-off. But I'm also a fan of option 1.
Okay. I'll give my 2 cents here. We started this with, looking at 8 schools. It started with a request from folks near Kingsley, but the previous council recognized that there was sort of a policy question beyond 300 feet of sidewalk, and we have directed our staff to try and come up with a way of handling that. And I think what we were trying to do was get to where we were increasing the safe routes to school in and around the school neighborhoods by adding complete sidewalk systems. You talked about patchwork. And so nobody up here likes cutting down trees. I mean, we spend a lot of money planting trees. We spend a lot of money and risk dragging out the lifespan of trees. But in my mind, this is a question about sort of the higher level policy. What do we think our village should look like, and how do we think it should function in the long term? And so from my perspective, I think the first alternative makes the most sense, not because I want to get rid of 16 trees or 7 more trees that might otherwise be necessary. But neighborhoods change, people change. We see this with parking, we see it with traffic patterns. I think 58 will tell you their enrollment tends to be the same but move around town. Mm-hmm. And so I think this is an opportunity for us to solidify the idea that walking is important in our neighborhoods and walking is important with our schools. And I'd like to see us have a regular, I'm going to call it a regular sidewalk that matches people's expectations, not maybe today, but also 25 years from now or the next 2 generations of people that move in and buy houses. We're talking about investing, $200,000-ish here, and this is the first of potentially 8 versions of this over time, and it can make a big impact on our community. So I really would prefer option 1. If there was some compromise that made everybody feel better, I could live with 4, but I'm really opposed to carriage walks. I've seen too many of them in Ogden. I know we have them around town. We have one at Lincoln Center I was just whining about the other day. They're here and there, but they do not serve the purpose of separating people from traffic nearly as well as a regular sidewalk does. And so whether you're a kid on a bike or you're a kid in the snow or you're a senior or whatever it is, or you're a family walking down the sidewalk, the carriage walk is just not the same. It's obviously better than walking in the street, but that's about it. So I really don't like that option much. I much prefer option 1. Anybody in the audience want to speak to this issue? Please come on down to just one at a time, come on down to the podium.
Hi, thank you. My name is Cheryl. My husband, John Avery, and I live at 1103 Norfolk Street, right on the corner of Carpenter and Norfolk. It seems obvious that it's a done deal that you all support the sidewalk, so I wouldn't spend a lot of time on that, though I have to say we were the one person who said no sidewalk. Many families in the neighborhood have raised their children to adulthood without incident. And I don't like the fact that 16 trees would be cut down. I don't like the fact that it would impact our bioswale, which we got like 4 or 5 years ago and really like. And it took the village, honestly, 3 years to get it right, the bioswale, and now it'll all be like dug up again. Secondly, one of my main concerns, although it wouldn't really impact us so much, although it being on the corner, now we have another sidewalk to shovel, so all the way along Norfolk Street and all the way along Carpenter, but is that for the neighbors who are really impacted, like right next to us, who have a nice brick driveway that the sidewalk would go right between, that any impact and damage to their property, you know, is gonna, whatever you put in, whatever you do, you'll fix that for any of the residents who have that sidewalk now going right through their driveway. Our driveway happens to be behind our house, so we're not impacted by that. We just have grass in front of our house. But again, the bioswale is important to us. You know, we had it put in because it's good for the environment. It's beautiful now that it works right. The last 2 years, it has been just unbelievably pretty. And prior to that, because the drainage was not particularly good, it was very difficult to mow the lawn in that deep swale whenever it rained much in the spring or summer. It was just wet. It made it really tough. So again, sounds to me like the sidewalk's a done deal, so move on from that. But please preserve the swales as much as possible for those of us who have it. And any, you know, with the impact on the neighbors of the sidewalk going right through their driveways, make sure that you do it in such a way that it's done properly. You know, that if you're going partially through a brick driveway, replace the bricks all around it, make it look as nice as possible, and the whole job do well. Because, I mean, honestly, when you redid it a while back with the drainage, it was great. And I'm worried about digging some of that up again and maybe not be done right. Thank you.
Hi, hello. My name is Jose Anaya. I'm at 1109 Norfolk Street, Downers Grove. So I'm one of the residents that's affected by the sidewalk being made. I do agree with Standard 1. I think the reason why is I've been walking my son to school every day, crossing the street, and if you don't live there, it's a little bit. It's not the same. Like there's more like a dip if you're on the north side, which the south side is actually flat. So sidewalk would be great. And myself and a couple residents down on the same sidewalk, they almost fell off one time because of the, you know, ice and snow. Unfortunately, not all the residents, you know, clean their sidewalk, and that, you know, makes it a lot dangerous for the kids. And the other thing also is, I think Standard 1 is obviously safer for the children, as you stated, when they're riding their bikes and that sort of thing. When they're, you know, just, you know, seniors walking down the street. But if you're on the other side, you know, we have to kind of navigate through, you know, crossing the street and walking the kids over. So I have a fourth grader that goes to Kingsley, and, you know, I got 2 more years, you know, that I'm going to be walking them over. And I just want everybody to be safe. And I do agree that some of the high school kids, they're kind of like in a hurry. And even some of the older people, even like myself, you know, if you're in a hurry, you have to be careful. So that distancing will definitely be something that's helpful for the residents and for the kids. I'm not exactly sure, and obviously the Carriage Walk, you know, I'm not 100% on board, even though number 4 seems a little bit more, I guess, manageable. But like I said, again, it's more than, you know, everybody has their own, I guess, concern about it. Mine, more than anything, I think it's more overall, looking at it, you know, how the sidewalk is built on the other side, so it would be uniform. I don't know if that makes any sense, but it looks a lot, you know, number 1 would look, you know, if that proposal will go through, it mirrors the other side. Yeah, so I don't know if that makes any difference, but and obviously, you know, if they do the job, make it proper, you know, again, you know, my neighbor was saying that the bricks were put back. He has a brick driveway, and he has weeds coming out, which weren't there before. So I'm thinking they probably just didn't put like a layer. Some of the bricks are not even. Also, like he had previously built it before, had it done. So, yeah, that's basically it. Thank you.
Thank you.
My neighbor, I'm Tom Capel. I'm the guy with the brick driveway. Blame me. Yeah, our main concern, we understand the safety aspect, which I'm pretty sure is the purpose, underlying purpose, correct?
Yeah.
Yeah.
So, you know, whatever alternative you pick, we're just asking that
quality is there for the workmanship. Because when the sewers were done, there were issues, a lot of issues. So, we want, the driveway put back properly, everything done the way it should be. And that's really my biggest point. Thank you.
Thank you.
Good evening. Janice Fellows, 1127 Norfolk. I've been to many of these meetings before, talking about all the sidewalks, and clearly I really appreciate everybody's effort in really studying all of this, because as it's been said, this is about the safety and it is about long-term solution. So as much as, I have one of those giant trees in my front yard, and as much as I hate the idea of all of those coming down and really changing the look of our street initially, I think, again, you just have to kind of think long-term. It's the best solution. I will say my husband and I, as well as some of the other neighbors, kind of directly on either side of us, we're pretty much in favor of number 4, which was kind of the meander carriage walk closer to the street. I don't disagree with all of the arguments here in terms of, is that really the most safe solution? There is the whole snow removal situation. It is what it is. There's not much you're going to be able to do for that. And it's not like we do have 4 seasons, typically. So it's not year round that we would have to deal with that. I think one idea was brought up or suggestion, remove a tree, plant a tree. I think in terms of what I remember of the previous meeting, the sidewalk meeting, we can't do that based on the available space to be able to replant the trees in that parkway area. So, I guess I would suggest let's continue to further examine that if that is an option. The one option, number 3, which is have an easement for the property owners that to meander inside the property line. Absolutely no way. And I can say all of the neighbors I shouldn't say all, I didn't speak to every single one of them, but many of the neighbors that this affects, it is literally it feels like 10 feet, 12 feet away from my front porch. I have 0 front yard, and so absolutely not. Unfortunately, I'm just not going to go for that, and I could probably say that the other neighbors I've spoken to also would not agree to that. So if number 1 is the solution, option number 1 is the solution, I support that. And again, I would maybe look to the village for suggestions and help in, replanting something, something to make the neighborhood feel like a neighborhood, and it just didn't come through and, bulldoze all of this as the solution. So, and I definitely mimic some of the other homeowners that drainage is a huge factor on our street, as probably plenty in Downers Grove, but I moved into a new property or a new house on this property just 4 years ago. And already I've spent well over $10,000 trying to solve my own personal property drainage. And some of that actually lives in my front yard. So one of my comments back to the group was making sure that they have the opportunity to meet with each of the different homeowners to talk about how this drainage solution is going to affect their particular property, because everybody has a different situation and solution, whether some pump is discharging into that swell right now, or some other kind of drainage that really just want to make sure that it's done thoughtfully for each of the residents, and that we are fully aware of just all the construction that's happening. Even though it's not our property, it's village property, it's something that we are still responsible for in terms of maintaining and making it all look nice. We don't want to end up with puddles and floods and anything else redirected elsewhere. So that's it. Thank you.
Thank you.
Sorry, I've got to speak for the trees. What can I say? I just want to say that in terms of the drainage problem, those large mature trees are being extremely helpful in their root systems to deal with those drainage problems. It also is proven that large mature trees increase the value of properties. So if you take all those trees out, particularly those mature trees that are making that street, and I don't even know what the street looks like, but is giving it its shady tree-lined street, you're devaluing these people's property. The value of their property will go down, I am suggesting, because those trees provide a monetary value to their property. So there's an economy for this, and there is an aspect for the drainage, to say nothing of the other important aspects that mature trees are giving. So I sure hope you consider number 4. Thanks.
Thank you. Okay, anyone else want to touch on this? Okay, any follow-up council comments? Chris?
Yeah, just quickly, do we know with option number 4, what percentage of the sidewalk across the 2 blocks would meander into the carriage? Roughly?
Percentage, no, but it's 40%, 30 to 40% maybe, just off the top of my head.
Okay, thank you.
Rich, please.
If we replant these new trees we're talking about, where would we plant them?
I'd have to look. We'd have to get creative, because certainly in some areas where you've got a sidewalk and a ditch, you don't want to plant the tree back in the ditch. So we would have to look at each individual location. They may have to shift around. We may have to look at putting them on the backside of the sidewalk on private property or something like that. I don't know. Okay. But there are certainly options. We just have to get a little creative.
Well, I know on the Saratoga to Carpenter section, there are really 4 mature trees in play. Could we look at the costs involved in planting 7-inch caliper trees as opposed to what's our standard caliper that we put in the parkway?
2-ish.
2-inch?
Yeah.
Because that would give us probably a 20-year head start.
Yeah. It does. I think when you transplant or plant a tree that large, you can not necessarily get as long-term benefits out of it. The 2-inch tend to grow better and faster. But we could look at that, for sure.
You'd have to use a big tree spade, like the 96-inch tree spade gives you, to the point where they don't have to root prune them years in advance. So I think I'd like us to look at those actual costs. And what are the impacts? Have we ever planted replacement trees on private property that the village puts in?
Not to my knowledge.
And could we entertain a tree agreement with, if we did something like that, where the neighbors would take over responsibility and agree to trickle water once a week and all of that neat stuff?
So all options will be on the table. If there's one thing this staff knows, is how important trees are to this council. And so when Andy, Director Sikich, says we will get creative, we will look at all options, because the message has been loud and clear in all 16 years I've been here. Trees are important for all the reasons stated by residents and other folks tonight. So yes, Commissioner, absolutely all options will be on the table. We should have more information soon.
Okay, thank you.
Greg?
Thank you, Mayor. I'd like to see included in one of the options, excuse me, the idea of going down the road of sort of filling in those ditches and curb and gutter. I would assume that you've got, if there's a lot more room that's not in a giant swale, with apologies to the folks at bioswale, that you'd have a lot more room to plant a tree as opposed to down in a ditch. So just for the sake of completing, whatever options might be out there, let's take a look at it.
So let's make sure I heard that correctly. Are you asking us to consider a redesign of the parkway as part of the sidewalk project?
Yes.
Okay. We will be happy to do that if that's the direction of this council. That is a huge shift in policy making and cost, and would be way different than we were expecting, and we are not prepared to proceed on the schedule you've seen tonight with that type of work.
I'm kind of wondering if that would move the decimal point over 1.
Me too.
Yeah.
And one comment from a resident, our drainage, at least on our side of the block, has been pretty good. So
They can't hear you at home, so.
our drainage on our side of the block, I don't know about you guys, has been pretty good. So the option to, cover up the ditches petrifies me,
Yep.
Okay.
I can't speak to the, other side of the block where they've had some drainage issues, I guess, but our side has been good.
I have put some work in to get it, just like the other resident. When we first moved in, it was normal. We realized.
I mean, it's just a consideration for that option.
Now, it sounds like it's probably dead in the water, but thought I'd throw it out there.
I have a question.
It's probably dead, but as long as we're recording this meeting, Greg and I think alike on a lot of these sidewalk, ditch, storm sewer related issues. And it probably is, it turns this $250,000 project into maybe another decimal and then times 8 potentially. But it is a subject I hope that we get into at some point in the not too distant future, much higher policy level, broader basis. Any other comments from the council?
I have one question.
Leslie, please.
Yeah. So what is the projected impact then on drainage, knowing that there has been a lot of work done on some of these homes in terms of putting the sidewalk in that option number 1? I know it said that the impact is minimal, but obviously it's going to have some impact that we planned for. So can you just kind of detail that a little bit, or at least get back to us on that if you can't right now?
Sure. No, I mean, we would work with each of the property owners to make sure that their existing drainage systems are not made worse by the project for sure. And if there's anything we can do to help facilitate it, we definitely would do that.
Okay. Obviously, having more impermeable surface is going to have some sort of an impact. So, yeah.
One of the things I'll just remind everybody, those watching at home and colleagues that have joined us recently, these places that don't have sidewalks that we're talking about in Norfolk here right now, others down the line, don't have sidewalks because 30 years ago, when we started what you guys may have heard of as the sidewalk matrix, frankly, these were hard. They were hard to do for a variety of reasons. They were probably hard to do for trees. They were probably hard to do for drainage. They were hard to do for elevation and grade. There are challenges behind them. They were largely deselected when we were going through and trying to put sidewalks in. So they're tougher spots to do. So there will be more dramatic trade-offs as we work through this list. Okay, thank you, Andy.
You're welcome.
Thank you, Andy. Let's talk next steps. This was a great first reading discussion of this item. We got some great feedback from the council. We will prepare a draft motion for next week's council meeting. We'll come back with some more information, some of the questions we heard, and then we'll look for a vote on that draft motion that will send us on our way to design a project. That is the first go or no-go decision. There's another go or no-go decision later in the year that Andy described once the council sees the final design and the contract itself. So a couple more opportunities for input and direction. And with that, Mayor, that ends our first reading tonight.
Any managers report tonight?
No report, Mayor. Thank you.
Attorney's report.
Thank you, Mayor. 3 items to present tonight. The first is an ordinance approving a zoning text amendment to allow for a drive-through medical facility as a special use in the ORM zoning district, an ordinance approving the special use to operate a drive-through medical facility at 2205 Butterfield Road, and an ordinance amending Chapter 3 of the Downers Grove Municipal Code relating to delivery and pickup service of alcohol. They will all be on next week's active agenda.
Thank you, Enzo.
Thank you, Mayor.
Item 11, Mayor and Council Member reports. It's an opportunity for council members to comment on goings-on in town or other agencies or groups they're connected to. We'll start on my right tonight.
No report, Mayor. Thank you.
Leslie.
Of course. So first I want to wish everyone a happy Pride Month. It is important to remember that before Pride became a celebration, it started out as a protest. You know, June 28, 1969 marks the start of the Stonewall riots, in which the LGBTQ community responded to a police raid that began at the Stonewall Inn. a bar in the Greenwich Village neighborhood of Manhattan that served as a safe haven for the city's LGBTQ community. At that time, anyone who identified as LGBTQ had minimal rights nationwide, and bars and restaurants even faced getting shut down for having gay employees or serving gay patrons. While police raided LGBTQ-friendly establishments before, on that particular night, members of the community decided to fight back, sparking an uprising that would launch a new era of resistance that's now become the celebration that we have today. So now we recognize the accomplishments of the LGBTQ community and work towards a more just and inclusive society. Many of you are familiar with the rainbow flag I have on my pin today, and it's important to realize that the colors of the flag have a meaning. Red is for life, orange for healing, yellow for sunlight, green for nature, blue for harmony, and violet for spirit. There's also now representation for our transgender community, and that flag's design represents the transgender community and consists of 5 horizontal stripes, 2 light blue, 2 pink, and 1 white in the center. The stripes at the top and bottom are traditional blue and pink, respectively, for male and female. But the stripe in the middle is white for those who are transitioning or consider themselves non-binary. Equality Downers Grove, EQDG Pride, a community organization that creates an accepting and an equitable environment for LGBTQ plus people through education, support, social action, and advocacy, is celebrating Pride for the first time in Downers Grove. So I just want to let everyone know that local artists are volunteering their time to paint multiple windows downtown that will remain in place all month. You may have already walked by them or seen the pictures on social media. They're beautiful. Cadence, the Foxtail, and Pierce Tavern are going to offer Pride picnics to go each weekend in June. A portion of the proceeds will be donated to Youth Outlook, which is the first social service agency in Illinois solely dedicated to the support of LGBTQ plus youth. Several additional businesses will offer Pride items. Some will donate a portion of their proceeds to Youth Outlook. So stop in to check out special Pride products at Louisa and Millie's, Fair Game, Anderson's Bookshop, the Downers Grove Public Library, Happy Dog Barkery, Peak Running, Wells Street Popcorn, Charlie and Grace, Adorned, and more. The library is also hosting a virtual event tomorrow evening at 6:30 p.m. titled Pronouns Matter, Beyond He and She. The event will feature a presenter, Andy Voinovich, who is the associate pastor at First Methodist Church in Downers Grove, also here today, and they are an elder in the Northern Illinois Conference of the United Methodist Church. So check the library website to register. And finally, that First United Methodist Church on Maple Avenue will be holding a Pride in the Parking Lot event this Sunday, June 6th from 1 to 4 p.m. Some of the congregation's youth and young adults have planned a variety of fun activities, and all are welcome. It's a family-friendly event. And finally, one of the most exciting things that I know that Pastor Andy has been talking about for a long time is that a Youth Outlook drop-in center will open in Downers Grove this fall, offering support for youth, parents, and community education. So to learn more about the activities and Youth Outlook, you can find EQDG Pride on Facebook. It's a public group. Or you can go to www.youth-outlook.org if you want more information about Youth Outlook. So that's all I have.
Thank you. Danny.
I have no report, but if the EQDG Pride could send one of those artists my way, I got a couple windows they can paint.
Chris.
Thank you, Mayor. I also want to thank EQDG Pride and all the businesses and residents who have been working so hard to plan all the activities that we'll be celebrating this Pride Month. The window art is beautiful, but more important, the powerful messages that they're sending in a way that only art can. I'd also like to take this opportunity to encourage everyone to support and participate in the events and offerings, many of which not only raise awareness, but also money, as mentioned, for the Youth Outlook to help support their new drop-in center here in Downers Grove. As a former member of the Human Services Committee, I had the pleasure of hearing all about Youth Outlook and the impact they've had on so many lives. And I look forward to seeing so much more from them here in our village. I was also so pleased to hear tonight's proclamation. Thank you, Mayor. What I consider is a great first step to recognition and raising awareness about ways we can support family members, neighbors, residents, and friends who are part of our LGBTQ plus community. Proclamations like this are so important, especially at a time when we are seeing efforts to undermine the rights of LGBTQ communities in too many parts of our country. And I've recommended Downers Grove to many friends who have ultimately landed here, and I've often used the word welcoming to describe our town. Today, thanks to these festivities planned for Pride Month, along with the official village acknowledgement, I think Downers Grove became a little more welcoming. Thank you, Mayor.
Thank you, Chris. Greg.
Thank you, Mayor. And I too want to thank you, Mayor, for issuing the proclamation recognizing Pride Month. I think it's been a long time coming. And I want to thank the folks at EQDG and everyone who has supported LGBTQ policies and rights. And I think it's only right that it be recognized in this manner. You know, we have such a uniquely welcoming village, and with a diverse and vibrant community. And I think all you have to do is walk around our downtown now to see just how much it is. And it's right that we are truly welcoming and recognizing all of the families, the diverse families that make Downers Grove their homes. And we hope that everyone continues to be as welcoming as they have been thus far, and only continues to improve. So thank you, Mayor, for the proclamation. Thank you to everyone at EQDG, and I'm looking forward to all of the festivities. Thank you.
With that, we are not really adjourning. We're going to executive session tonight. We have occasionally subjects which take us into an executive session meeting, and we are going to do that this evening. So with that, is there a motion?
Mayor, I move to convene into closed session pursuant to Section 2C2 of the Illinois Open Meetings Act to consider collective negotiating matters between the village and its employees or their representatives.
Second.
Rosa, would you please call the roll?
Commissioner Jose?
Aye.
Commissioner Sadowski-Fugit?
Aye.
Commissioner Glover?
Aye.
Commissioner Gilmartin?
Aye.
Commissioner Culvaney?
Aye.
Mayor Barnett?
Aye. We are going to executive session. Thank you all for coming tonight. Have a good evening.